Today we're going to be talking about something that I'm sure quite a number of us on the call can relate to or have probably experienced. And it's great that we're having this type of conversation so that, we can just also rub mind. And one thing I've learned, especially as an educator, when it comes to mental health topics, is that the more we're able to have these conversations, the more we're not only able to learn, but also able to normalize the conversations. And so we're going to be looking at workplace stress and burnout, as has been. So I'll just give a little bit of an overview on that. You just give me a second. Let me just pull out this title. All right, so we're talking about managing stress and burnout in the workplace. So I think it's best to start with, what is stress, what is burnout, what does burnout look like, especially in the workplace. And so, according to World Health Organization, burnout is typically like maybe a syndrome or let me use the word manifestation of chronic workplace stress, where you do not successfully manage stress that arises from the workplace. A resultant effect of that is burnout. And some of the characteristics that you can find when you're burned out, even as an individual, is emotional exhaustion. So it's like a constant or prolonged feeling of exhaustion, or always, just feeling drained or feeling worn out, as it were. You can also have detachment, where there's this depersonalization, where you're detached from your work productivity. You're not feeling as excited or as passionate, if you were a passionate person, to do work, and you sort of maybe isolate. But it's burnout is generally prolonged exhaustion. It could also come about as a result of frustration, or no form of satisfaction exactly in the workplace. Okay, sorry, I just wanted to make sure that I'm still there. No form of satisfaction in the workplace. And a lot of us actually are burned out. And this is a very good conversation that we're having towards the year. I just want to pull up my presentation. This is a very interesting conversation that we're having towards the end of the year, because what we find in a lot of workplaces, especially in Nigeria, where people don't really speak about these things, that there's a lot of deadlines, there's a lot of rush to sort of finish the year in a good way. Even with entrepreneurs or business people who run their own businesses and have staff or team members, there's a lot of targets towards the end of the year, and there's that heightened pressure and heightened demand. So usually when that happens, what you find is that people are burned out, but they're not really talking about it, and they're probably just trying to get themselves together. But there's a lot of emotional exhaustion, there's a lot of detachment, there's a lot of reduced professional efficiency, more mistakes, feeling unproductive, not feeling incompetent. If you're the kind of person who will typically not make mistakes or errors in your emails or things that you send out, you find that you're making more of these mistakes because you're not able to concentrate. And there's just this overall feeling of mental tiredness. And it's very important that we know that, stress in the workplace is a normal thing. And I'm sure for most of us on the call, we know that, even when we define mental health and mental well-being, we define it as one of the things that we usually say is it's the ability to cope with the normal stresses of life. So the workplace actually presents stresses in life, whether you're trying to meet a deadline, whether you're trying to, get something done, or handle maybe more than what you had set out to do in the day. Those are the normal stresses that you would find in the workplace. But where it starts getting to a point of exhaustion, or you're not able to properly manage it, you don't put in systems in place, or you don't put in strategies or coping mechanisms to be able to handle that. And it's easy for people to say, oh yes, I'm going to take a break, or I'm going to rest. But if there are not effective strategies or coping mechanisms to be able to deal with this everyday stress, what happens is that it piles up, and then at the end of the day, it leads to burnout. So I just wanted to maybe sort of give that introduction, as it were. And when I talk about Nigeria, I just want to maybe contextualize a little bit, and I'm sure this also applies in different parts of the world. A lot of, while we may not have the best when it comes to data collection and all, but even just World Mental Health Day was on the 10th, and I had a webinar a training session with a particular organization, and there were over 150 of them on the call. And we spoke about burnout, just talking about managing burnout and, what are some mental resilience coping strategies and things like that. And it was a very interesting conversation because quite a number of them actually admitted that they are burned out. In fact, when I ask people, like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how burned out are you at the moment, quite a number of them, a lot, like only 10% or thereabouts were above, between 5 to 10. The remaining 90% were between 5 to 1. And I said 1 meaning your mental health and your state of burnout, like your mental health is in shambles and you are burned out. A lot of them were 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then some people were on minus. There were some people who were even honest enough to say, I'm on 0.1, I'm on -2. In fact, some people said their own is not even on the scale. So it just goes to show that, in the workplace, this is something that a lot of individuals go through, right? And I'll just go back once again. I just wanted to give that overview. At least if we're honest enough to talk about it, we can learn. So like I said, it's a state of emotional, mental, and physical exhaustion that is caused by prolonged or unmanaged stress. And the two keywords there are prolonged and unmanaged. So usually when it goes for a long period of time or it's not managed properly. And it's not just about feeling tired, because a lot of people can mistake feeling tired or feeling burned out. When you are completely depleted of motivation and physical or mental energy, then you can be said to be burned out. So in this situation, somebody may be feeling frustrated, or you're feeling unmotivated, or you're feeling less productive, even when you're still trying. Maybe you're a positive person, or you're an optimistic person, and you're wondering, okay, but why am I still feeling frustrated or unmotivated? The two of them can actually exist, especially when there is burnout. And that's why it's important that when these, some of the symptoms, which I will share, persist, the body and the mind, you need to be intentional about rest, recovery, and putting your mental well-being first, especially in the workplace. The workplace is where we spend a lot of our time in our lifetime. If you check it, Mondays to Fridays, except when you're on leave, you're in your office from 9 to 5. That is on paper. Some of us are probably there 7 to 10. I remember when I was doing my 9 to 5, I was there from 8 to 10. If you leave the office at 7, that is a good day. If you leave the office when it's still bright out, that is a very, very good day. So I was used to leaving the office when it's dark. And even as an entrepreneur, I think it's 12 to 12. I thought I was leaving to gain some freedom, but apparently it's still 12 to 12. So it's easy to get caught into that system of working, not putting pauses or strategies in place, and then at the end of the day we can get burnout. So what are some causes of burnout or excessive stress, even in the workplace? Lack of boundaries, inadequate sleep or rest. And lack of boundaries, I would talk about that later, because that also cuts across personal life and even professional life. So inadequate sleep or rest, even when you're on leave, you don't really know how to do the work-life balance thing, you believe it's impossible, so you're not resting. Or when you're resting, you're not mentally resting, because you're thinking about all the emails that you need to send or all the work that you need to do. So you're not getting enough sleep. Your body is not resting. Your mind is not resting. You're also not taking regular breaks. Some people, they actually have to beg them to take their leave, or they actually have to beg them to schedule in times on the weekends. Some people are at work on Saturdays and Sundays. And over time, all these things can actually cause burnout. Or perhaps you struggle with managing your time well. You get into the office, you say, oh, these are the 3 things that I'm going to do today. But before you know it, you start getting emails, your to-do list is out the window, you're overwhelmed, you're being shuffled and tossed here and there. You have different supervisors who are pulling at you. And this keeps on happening Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. There is no active plan in place to manage your time, and that could also cause burnout as well. Perhaps you might not have support in the workplace. You have supervisors, like I said, who are pulling at you, and maybe you're not able to communicate to them and say, okay, I'm being overwhelmed right now, or there's, I'm feeling burned out, or I have so many demands. Which one do I handle first? Or perhaps in your personal life, you don't really have people who you can talk to, people who you can spend time with, people who you can sort of relieve that stress with, maybe do something fun or engage in a hobby. If you're not able to laugh once in a while, these things do pile up and it can end up looking like burnout. I also spoke about poor work-life balance. Like I said, maybe you struggle to, if I'm sure if I asked a lot of people on the call, what does your life look like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday? A lot of people just say work. Maybe your life looks like work, back to, to the office, back to the house for those who go to church or go to the mosque or go wherever they're going. It's that triangle. No hobbies, nothing that you do for fun. Some people, I've asked them, what do you do for fun? They say, I work. What do you actually like to do? I like to make money. What do you like to do with that is not working or making money? I like to make more money. So how do you make money? I have to work. So it's like a triangle. And then at the end of the day, it always sounds funny, but over time it can cause work life. It can cause you to have poor work life balance. So what I'm saying is you need to be able to step out of yourself to look for the things that you enjoy, right? Also perfectionism. A lot of people like to say, oh, I'm a perfectionist. It sounds like a very nice thing to say, but being a perfectionist can cause heavy burnout, especially in the workplace. You're stuck on you want to send out an email, you're reading it 5 times or 10 times before you send it out. You're spending more time on that. You have a document that you have to churn out. You're spending so much time. No, it must be this certain way. It must be that way. It has to be reviewed. Over time, all of these things can cause burnout. And maybe you have unrealistic expectations. You're a business owner or you're in the workplace and you have a milestone or a target that you've set for yourself before the end of the year. I want to, do this. And you haven't really set any action plans as to how you're going to accomplish that. So you're putting so much pressure on yourself. That's why you can't sleep. That's why you're not enjoying yourself. When somebody tells you good morning, you're saying, what is so good about the morning? You even look at them and say, with your head that looks like coconut, you are just angry, you're on edge. And everybody is like, just laugh. When people are laughing around you, you feel like they're on serious. These are things that can make people on edge a lot of time. And before you know it, you're carrying so much stress within you. Even I spoke about laughing, but even just laughing or smiling can relieve a lot of unmanaged stress or prolonged stress in the body. So what are some signs and symptoms that you could see, to understand what burnout looks like, especially in the workplace? So irritability, emotional signs. Irritability, you're always irritable. Like I said, nobody can tell you good morning because you always want to know what's good about the morning. When somebody is laughing, when somebody just, gives a joke, you're like, yeah, it's not time to joke, or somebody talks to you, you're snapping easily, maybe to your colleagues or your supervisors, well, for those who can, and then maybe people who you work with or people who are your juniors, or maybe you have a feeling or sense of detachment even from the work or from why exactly you do what you do. There's that numb feeling. You're just there. You're basically on autopilot going every day, right? And not really feeling what you're doing. You're not in the moment. You're not living in the moment. Or maybe you're experiencing loss of motivation. You're not motivated to show up every day, or you're feeling unappreciated. Like, why am I even here in the first place? I don't feel motivated. Perhaps you have packed on so much, and at this point you are feeling overwhelmed and burned out, right? We also have some physical signs. You're constantly tired, but remember I said that burnout is different from just feeling tired, which is a one-off thing. But this is if you're constantly tired, or you have constant fatigue, maybe you have headaches, you're not able to sleep well, or you're constantly falling ill because maybe your body's immune system has sort of broken down because it is exposed to too much stress. And what that happens is that you can constantly start falling ill, and the illness could just be maybe an infection here or there, or maybe a cold, a flu. Usually that's a sign that you are burned out. We also have some behavioral signs. Maybe your performance is declining, like I spoke earlier. You're making mistakes. You're having errors, things that you do. You're procrastinating things that you would typically get done. You find that you keep on pushing it, or maybe you start withdrawing because there's a lot that you're dealing with, and you start isolating yourself. So withdrawing from friends, from families, from colleagues. Maybe you were the, in quotes, life of the party, even in the office, but then after a while you just find that you go in there, you're just like, you know what, let me just do what I'm here for. I just want to leave, assuming you're able to get anything done if you're not just staring at your laptop or your screen and unable to do anything. So these are just some of the signs. And then so people like to talk about different stages of burnout, which, I mean, if as those of us who are working, we might probably find that throughout the year, maybe we have experienced any one of those stages. So one is what they call the honeymoon stage. So that's where maybe you started the year and you were all high energy, you're motivated. Oh, this year is going to be my year. It's going to be amazing. There was still, deadlines and a lot of stress along the way in terms of work, but you were able to get it done. You were still pushing through. Maybe this took you from January, February, March, all the other personal goals I had, I'm going to like knock them out. Then by April, a couple of things started happening. May, you're like, I'm still going to keep on pushing through because I decided this year is going to be my year. And then you get to the second stage, which is the onset of stress. And you notice a little bit, a dip in your enthusiasm. Maybe you've gotten to April, May. I'm just painting a picture. It doesn't mean this is how everybody's situation is. So maybe April, May, you've dipped a little bit. You're no longer enthusiastic. Now you're now like, is this year really going to be my year? Am I going to be able to make that mark in my workplace? You're still tired, but you're still trying to push through, but this stress is now setting in. Remember, throughout all this period, you were also not setting boundaries. You've not been resting well, poor work-life balance, poor time management, no support, no talking to anybody because, it started great. So you're like, oh, I can do this. And then you get into stage 3, which is chronic stress, where there's now the persistent exhaustion, irritability, and declining performance. So you find that, well, you're not as motivated. You're now constantly tired, but you sort of fit this cycle into your life where you feel like, okay, well, maybe this is just how the rest of the year would be, where we're just tired and all of that. And then you get into stage 4, which is burnout proper. At this place, you are emotionally numb. Maybe you've gotten to August, now September. You're like, all the things I said I was going to do and all the things that I've done, but I'm still exhausted. I didn't take any break. And then you now start putting a lot of pressure. So there's now emotional numbness. You are burnt out proper. There's extra stress, some cynicism even creeps in, like I said, which is the all of these things that I'm even doing, what's even the point? And so what's so good about the money? Why are people even happy? How was this year? This year was just somehow. And then the lack of motivation sets in. And then before you know it, you get to the stage 5, which is it now starts having long-term physical and mental health consequences, which I'm sure we'll talk about. And some of those mental health consequences could be anxiety because of the pressure, or even depression, where you now start isolating yourself, or withdrawing from your activities or things that you would typically do, even as an individual, as it were. So it's important that if, because of time, I don't know how many more minutes I have, but I know we're also going to talk about some practical tips that could help us, overcome that stress and manage burnout in the workplace. But it's important that we are, number one, honest with ourselves, especially if you find yourself in any of these categories. If you're currently feeling burned out, you're currently confused as to how to manage stress. There's a difference between keeping it moving, being positive, and actually being burned out. You can be positive, but you can also burn out. When I say positive means you're still keeping it moving, you're still being optimistic, you still want to achieve your goals, you're still waking up on time, you're still going at it, but you've not really been putting things in place to rest and recover. And then what that could lead to is that so in a way, some people, the Gen Z people, they call it delulu, like you're delusional about the fact that you're burned out, and you're like, oh, but this is a lifestyle. And so that's why a lot of people usually have maybe high blood pressure, because your body is constantly in a state of excessive stress. Your heart is constantly pumping faster than it should. There's a lot going on in your body, and then before you know it, over time, those physical health consequences, like maybe having an enlarged heart or having high blood pressure issues or falling ill, they now start setting in. Depression starts setting in. So you can still be optimistic, but also realize, okay, I need to check myself. Have I been able to rest? Do I struggle with time management? Am I able to put in boundaries even in my personal life? Because burnout could be a mixture of both, from your professional life and also your personal life, where you're not able to maybe tell people no, or people are just able to come around you and dump things. Even in the workplace, beyond working, maybe you don't have boundaries with your colleagues. People make certain kinds of jokes, or they make certain kind of conversations that are not very beneficial to you, or they make you feel some type of way against how you would naturally like to feel. These are some of the things that could actually impact on your mental health and well-being in general. So just before I, go into some of the tips, I just wanted to find out in terms of timing, Rita or Charles, if because I know there were going to be some questions.
Okay, yes, just please go ahead and finish your presentation.
Okay.
Again, it's supposed to be 1 hour, but we can spill over.
Okay. All right. So, okay. So just some tips that I just want to share some tips. I'm sure some of them we have probably already heard them before. I call them sustainable self-care practices. So it's not just a one-off thing. Everybody might just be in a rush to say, oh, if you're burned out, yes, speak to a professional. You should speak to a professional if you can. But there are certain tips and practices that even in our daily lives we can incorporate to make sure that we are not constantly living a life of burnout. Because one important thing that I've noticed, and I'm speaking to myself, is that sometimes we can actually be in a state of burnout for a really, really long time. And either we are in denial about it or we have adopted it as a lifestyle and it doesn't look like there's anything wrong with it. So we're constantly tired. In fact, some of us wear that exhaustion as a badge of honor. Like if we're not exhausted, I remember that I had to also reframe my mind when I stepped out of traditional 9 to 5 settings, because I was always exhausted, like day in, day out, week in, week out. And when I started running my own businesses and I wasn't exhausted as much, I felt like there was something wrong, because I was so used to being exhausted, being irritable, being always on edge, always being anxious. So for like a year or so I actually struggled, because I didn't understand what working without being exhausted looks like. And for a lot of us on this call, if you actually, a lot of us, when we think about work, it's just a normal thing. Of course it's work, so I should always operate from a place of exhaustion. But there are things that we can do, there are practices and tips that we can put in place to make sure that we're not always operating from a place of burnout. Because to be honest, when we're burned out, we know that we're not our best selves mentally, physically, emotionally, and even socially. And it's the people around us that sometimes get the hard end of it. So I'll just be sharing maybe a few tips, maybe just 5 or 6, and I'm sure we know some of them. And I'll also be sharing from personal experiences as well. But it's just important that we remember that when we focus on prioritizing our well-being, right, we become more focused, we become more creative, and we're emotionally steady, both in our workplace and in life. I know the workplace is where we spend a lot of time, but as workers, we need to remember to constantly practice self-care, right? So it's an intentional practice of taking care of your physical, emotional, and mental well-being. And it means making that conscious and intentional choice that would help you recharge, restore balance, and maintain resilience, especially when work or life feels overwhelming. So, keyword here, making the conscious and intentional choice that would help you recharge, restore balance, and maintain resilience, so that throughout the year you can finish strong. I'm sure you would notice that there are a number of people who, they always seem to be able to get things done. It's not because once in a while they don't feel burned out, or once in a while they are not trying to balance things, but it's just because maybe they've been able to put in practices and conscious choices that help them recharge, restore balance, and maintain resilience. So my first tip would be to take micro breaks during the day. So when you're working and you're not on leave, right, one thing that you can do is to step away from your desk every 90 minutes or every 1 hour, 60 minutes. So what you want to do is you might want to just stand up, walk around, stretch, maybe breathe. You can breathe in a couple of times, hold it, for some seconds, breathe out, stand up, just walk around or just take a short walk. And what this does for your brain is that it helps to reset your brain and improve the focus of your brain far more than when you're working non-stop. Sometimes, yes, it's in quote impossible to step away, maybe because you're on a meeting call or something that you need to do for 2 hours at a stretch. But once you have those stretches, make sure that maybe when you're done with your meeting or you're done with whatever you're doing, you stand up, walk away from your laptop, walk away from your computer, walk around, maybe drink some water, have some snack. It helps to reset your brain. This is what you can do during the day while you are working. Another one would be to practice some daily mindfulness or reflection, right? So in the morning when you wake up, you can also observe quiet time, right? That's something that I've been learning to do over the years that has really done magic for me. When you wake up in the morning, the first few moments of the day, what do you do with it? Do you just wake up and the next minute you're on your phone, you're rolling over? Or for those of us who have 10 alarms, but we don't answer the first one, so we keep on snoozing until we're late for the meeting, and then we start running up and down, and then before you know it, you have a chaotic morning. These things actually contribute in a way to poor balance. And what that does is that it kind of leaves you rattled and shaken at the beginning of the morning. And the way you wake up in the morning and set your tone for the day really matters, especially to your mental health and well-being. So in the morning when you wake up, try to have some time, quiet time, even if it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Some people have 1 hour, some people spend it to pray, some people spend it on just, maybe listening to calming music, or just journaling, or setting the intention of the day. You can do that 5 to 10 minutes. You can even do it during the day, maybe when you're taking your micro break. So you can either breathe, or you pray, or you meditate, or you journal. And what this does for the body, the mind and the body, is that it lowers stress levels, and it improves your clarity, and it boosts emotional resilience as well. So it improves the clarity, even if it's the focus for that day. What is the day going to look like for me? How do I center myself? How do I ground myself? How do I make sure that I'm not overwhelmed? And in doing some of these daily mindfulness or reflections, you can also incorporate daily affirmations, positive affirmations. That's something that I live by, that I know has transformed my life and the way I think. And affirmations are a powerful tool, and they have been, psychologically tested, and research has been done to show how affirmations help to rewire the brain and replace negative thought patterns with positive thoughts. So it helps to expand your brain and fill it with positive thoughts as you go along. So you're able to set the intentions for the day, you're able to speak to yourself, you're able to calm yourself, and you're able to center yourself, so that no matter what you face when you step into the office, no matter how rowdy or chaotic it is, you're able to center yourself with those words that you have spoken, with those words that you have, also said into the atmosphere. Because a lot of people believe, and I also believe to a large extent, that the words that you speak are very powerful. And if you wake up in the morning all frazzled and like, oh, today is going to be a hard day, today is going to be a crazy day, I have so many emails, I have too many things to do, today is going to be a long and stressful day, that's just what you might have. So when you wake up in the morning, what are the words that you say about how your day is going to go? These things could also just set things in place, and just serve as a way to calm you and boost your emotional resilience. Yes. Okay. Yes. James says very good on affirmations. Awesome. If you don't know how to use affirmations, you can try putting them down on sticky notes, sticking them on your laptop, maybe sticking them on maybe your mirror or your bedside table, places where you typically see them when you wake up. You can have them on your phone screen, or on your laptop screen, and just repeat them. You can have 5 or 6 daily affirmations that you see. Or, if you're on social media, you can follow pages that post daily affirmations, just as a way to, keep your mind positive and grounded. Another tip would be to prioritize your rest and sleep quality. And why this is important is because a lot of people think that, other than people who boast, oh, 3 hours is okay for me. Yeah, that's fine. But what is the quality of sleep that you have? And ideally, as adults, we should be aiming for 7 to 8 hours of quality sleep each night, and avoid screen, maybe your laptop or your phone screen, avoid it 30 minutes before bed. A lot of us are actually addicted to our phones, and that's the truth. And that has found a way to increase our stress levels, especially with all the things that are going on in the world. Or maybe you're still sending emails at 2 a.m. because that email must be sent at 2 a.m. when everybody else is asleep. I would know. I was there at some point. So there's that email that needs to go out at 2 a.m. or 1:30 a.m. Yes, there are some days where the deadlines may, really extend, but that should not be a habit. It shouldn't be a lifestyle. So you should aim for 7 to 8 or 6 hours of quality sleep. Quality sleep means before you went to bed, you put away your phones, you put away your laptops at least for 30 minutes. You laid in bed, you calmed yourself. Something that I do when my mind is racing a lot when I'm about to sleep is I imagine a still image in nature. So I can imagine maybe an ocean or a lake that is very still, and very quiet, like the water is not moving. So I picture it, and I do that, visualization of a calming scene in my head that just calms my mind down, and I focus in on it. I focus on it because I'm thinking so many things. Like I have so many, sometimes, in fact, it's almost like there's 1,000 people speaking. Oh, you have to do this, you have to do that. Oh, this idea for this. So I always have to center my mind back there before I sleep, to just be able to get some form of quality sleep, because some people actually rest with their bodies but not their minds, and that's why they end up waking up and they start feeling more exhausted than they felt even before they slept. So please, when you think about sleep, think about quality, and think about mental rest, not just physical rest as well. Your rested mind will definitely perform better. It will react calmer. You're not as irritable. When somebody asks you a question, you don't just jump into conclusion and start yelling at them. And you're also able to make sharper decisions, even in your workplace, even when it comes to thinking outside the box, or when it comes to thinking on your feet. Even though the work is demanding, you're able to do all of these things when you prioritize sleep quality. Another tip would be to engage in physical activity that you enjoy. I remember mentioning that for a number of us, it's just work, church or mosque, back home, work, and that's the cycle. Do we take walks? Take walks, maybe 30 minutes to 1 hour walks, stretch between calls or meetings, engage in dancing if you like to dance, or just do some nice quick workouts at the beginning of the day or at the end of the day. It really, really boosts your energy. Movements boost your energy. Like I said, there are people who throughout the year, it's not that they don't have deadlines or schedules, but they've been able to incorporate these sustainable self-care practices to keep them going throughout the year. And when I mentioned prioritizing rest, that also means taking a leave. Sometimes that's hard for even business owners, but you need to be intentional about setting aside time, maybe quarterly, every year, or maybe every 6 months, where maybe for a week or 2 weeks you're not in front of your laptop, you are just resting. If you can afford to go outside of your home, maybe take a trip, do something like that, go to an Airbnb, or just silence everything around you. That would be really great, because it will help to reset. So people who work all year long and still look good to go by December, they've learned how to hone in on these practices. And so when it comes to physical activity, it tends to boost your energy. It keeps you active, it keeps you alive, it keeps you ready to go, and it reduces tension in your body, in your mind, and you're also able to, it also enhances your mood. For those of you who go to the gym, or who work out, or even take walks, I'm sure after you take your walk, even if you're sweating, you feel better mentally. Your mood already lifts up, even if some of the things that you were doing were tough. So I would encourage everybody, you might not want to go to the gym, but try to take walks, even if it's 3 times a week, or you get your 10,000 steps, whatever keeps you motivated. It really makes you feel good at the end of the day. And then I would say another tip would be to schedule unplugged time each week. I know that I mentioned taking a leave or being intentional about maybe taking trips. Even during the week, you don't have to wait for that long leave. During the week, is there a time where your phone is off, it's on DND, you're spending that time with your family, in your hobbies? Maybe you love to watch football, or you just want to watch a movie, or you just want to sit by a park, a quiet park, or just go out with your friends and family. You're not just always on the phone. And what that does is that it helps you to detox digitally. So when you detox digitally and you're spending more time with physical, presence around you, or just also maybe in nature, it helps to allow your brain reset and recharge, and you're able to reconnect with joy. You find the beauty in seemingly little things. You're able to just appreciate life for what it is, and where you are in life, and just, how do I say it now, you're able to reconnect with joy. That's the best way to say it. And I think the last tip I'll give, not that these are all the tips, but these are just some of the tips that I'm giving because of time. Build emotional support systems. Don't isolate when you feel drained or when you feel tired, or don't withdraw. That is the tempting thing to do, because you're too tired. You just want to spend your Saturdays indoors resting. But there's something that just talking to a family member, or a trusted friend, or somebody who is funny, or somebody who makes you laugh, or just engaging in activities that, with people that you have good relationships with, can do to you, for your body, for your mind. It just gives it that recharging feeling, just being able to laugh or being able to talk even about what you may be going through. And what we find is that healthy relationships, they usually protect against burnout and they foster belonging. One thing I love about conversations is that you're able to draw on different perspectives. So if you even share with somebody, oh, I'm struggling, I'm feeling burned out, they may be able to open up a perspective to you about the way you do your work, or about the way you handle life issues that is causing you to be burned out, whether it's in the workplace or personally. You may have a friend who may tell you, yes, no wonder you're burned out, because you can't say no to people. You're trying to be everyone's savior and you're everywhere around. You might have another family member who asks you, when are you taking your leave? Your leave dates have been available since January. This is December. You haven't even gone on leave, but you're telling them, oh, I'm feeling burned out. And this may be things that you might not really have considered that actually play a huge role. So those support systems are key. If you feel like you don't have anybody around you who can do that, whether it's a family friend or a trusted friend or people that you laugh with, I would encourage you to join support groups or communities. Go on social media. You will find so many communities in your local community, wherever it is that you belong. Whether it's a community of people who love to watch football. I found so many communities of people who love to paint, communities of people who just love to talk about their days, communities of people who, who are single, who are married, who love to learn, who, there's so much, there's different support groups for different categories. So you might want to join a support group, meet new people, engage, and just, do great things. And I think the last one I would just share is, if you feel like you are really, really, really burned out and you've tried all these tips, but it's not working, I would say you should speak to a mental health professional, a counselor, a therapist. Reach out, to someone and just speak to them. Your conversations are confidential. They can give you practical tips that you can use. They can work with you to be able to build or incorporate a lifestyle where you don't have to be burned out. And I'll just say that it is possible to live a life where you are not burned out, whether it's from work duties or activities or deadlines. And it's possible to live a life where, you're able to incorporate sustainable practices that keep you going all year long, so that you can also be of valuable contribution, not just to yourself, but to your family, to your friends, to your loved ones, and to your community at large. So burnout is a thing and it does affect a lot of us. But the good news is that with some of these practices and with some of these things, a lot more, you can also do some research to check for more things that you can do and incorporate into your life. We're able to, find that we can actually live mentally healthy lives, and still get the work that we're doing done and still do it well, because I believe that whatever is worth doing is worth doing well. So with some of these things, I hope that it can be helpful, even especially as we close out the year. For those of you who have put certain milestones or deadlines on yourselves, I would say go easy on yourself. The end of the year is not the end of the race, or it's not the end of life. Go easy on yourself. Go back to your why. Remember why you started. If you're struggling to finish the year with grace, go back to why you started and just show yourself some compassion, right? While still building mental resilience and moving forward. Remember, no unhealthy comparison, because this is usually the season where it starts happening. You're looking at somebody else's highlight reel and you're comparing it to your background work of what you've done the whole year, and it's looking like nothing good has happened for you this year. But if you really checked, there's probably a lot to be thankful for. So don't, have a lot of unhealthy comparison, because that's the thief of joy, and it brings a lot of internal pressures, which also bring about exhaustion and frustration. So I hope that this has been helpful, and I really wish us burnout free and mentally healthy lives, even as we wrap up 2025.